just the name of an old friend of mine, and gone at that time. So it's just George Roberts.
Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner brought All in the Family into millions of homes, creating some of TV's most memorable moments. But off-camera, their relationship was far from friendly. What looked like playful banter on screen was actually fueled by deep tension, creative clashes, and personal disagreements that few people knew about. In this video, we'll explore how their differences turned into a lasting feud, why it never healed, and the moments that made the tension impossible to ignore. Join us as we uncover why Carroll O'Connor truly despised Rob Reiner. Chemistry or conflict? When All in the Family first aired, it felt different from anything else on television. The arguments sounded real. The tension felt uncomfortable in a way sitcoms usually avoided. Archie Bunker and Michael Stivic didn't just trade jokes. They clashed in ways that mirrored real family fights happening in homes across America. Viewers believed what they were watching because it didn't feel staged or polite. It felt raw, sharp, and honest. That realism became the show's greatest strength, and it's the main reason audiences connected so deeply with it. Because the performances were so convincing, many viewers assumed Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner must have been close off-screen. After all, shows with strong chemistry often rely on trust and mutual respect between actors. People imagined long conversations between takes, shared laughter, and a bond built through years of working together. The public rarely questioned this assumption. The idea that two actors could create such powerful scenes while disliking each other simply didn't fit the usual narrative people expected from successful television. But that assumption ignored an important truth. Strong acting does not require personal warmth. O'Connor and Reiner were professionals who took their roles seriously. What viewers saw as chemistry was often the result of discipline, preparation, and commitment to the script. Their scenes worked because they both understood the stakes of the show and the importance of getting it right. The conflict felt real because both men deeply believed in what their characters represented, even though they disagreed on how to show those ideas. This is where the danger of mistaking acting chemistry for personal harmony comes in. When audiences assume actors must like each other, they miss the reality of how creative work often functions. Performance is not friendship, it is cooperation under pressure. On All in the Family, that cooperation existed, but it was strained. The tension audiences praised on screen did not disappear when the cameras stopped. Instead, it often followed the actors into rehearsals and discussions about how scenes should be played. Early signs that the tension was real appeared long before most viewers noticed anything was wrong. During table reads and rehearsals, disagreements surfaced about tone, delivery, and intent. Reiner frequently questioned scenes and pushed for clearer political meaning. O'Connor, with years of experience behind him, viewed this as stepping beyond an actor's role. These moments weren't playful debates or creative brainstorming sessions. They were uncomfortable, and they created friction that others on set could feel. As filming continued, these disagreements became patterns. O'Connor grew more guarded. Reiner grew more insistent. What looked like sharp banter on screen was supported by real frustration behind it. The show's authenticity came at a cost. The same intensity that made scenes believable also revealed that the conflict was not an act. It was rooted in opposing views about performance, purpose, and control. And once that line was crossed, there was no easy way back because the chemistry that audiences loved was already being powered by something much deeper and far more personal. And this was only the beginning because those early cracks quickly turned into something neither man could ignore. Two worldviews, one set. Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner came to All in the Family with very different ideas about what acting was supposed to be and what the show should accomplish. These differences weren't small or technical. They were deep, personal, and rooted in how each man understood his role as an artist. From the start, those opposing views made working together difficult, even before personal feelings entered the picture. O'Connor was a veteran. He had spent decades working in theater, film, and television, and he believed strongly in discipline and structure. To him, a set had a clear order. Writers wrote, directors directed, and actors performed. That structure wasn't about ego, it was about respect for the process. O'Connor believed that an actor's job was to serve the character exactly as written and shaped by the director. He valued preparation, timing, and restraint. Every pause mattered. Every line carried meaning. He believed that good acting didn't need explanation or commentary. It spoke for itself. For O'Connor, acting was a craft, not a political tool. He did not see his job as teaching the audience what to think. His goal was to present a character honestly, even when that character was flawed or offensive. He believed people learned more from seeing behavior presented truthfully than from being told directly what was right or wrong. That belief shaped how he played Archie Bunker. He wanted Archie to feel real, not exaggerated or simplified, because realism forced viewers to confront uncomfortable truths on their own. Rob Reiner approached the show from a very different place. He was younger and shaped by the political movements of the late 1960s. For him, All in the Family wasn't just a sitcom, it was a platform. He believed television had a responsibility to challenge harmful ideas directly and clearly. In his view, Michael Stivic wasn't just a character. He was a voice meant to push back against bigotry and outdated thinking without hesitation. Reiner believed performance should make a point. He wanted the message to be obvious, not subtle. When Archie expressed prejudice, Reiner felt it needed to be clearly corrected and defeated. Anything less felt like a missed opportunity. To him, ambiguity weakened the show's purpose. He saw clarity as necessary, even if it meant pushing harder during rehearsals or questioning how scenes were played. These philosophies clashed at their core. O'Connor believed nuance created understanding. Reiner believed clarity created change. O'Connor valued restraint. Reiner valued confrontation. One wanted the audience to think. The other wanted the audience to act. Neither approach was wrong on its own, but together they created constant tension. Sharing the same set meant these differences collided daily. There was no middle ground because each man believed deeply in his approach. Over time, what began as a creative divide became something much harder to manage. And once those beliefs started clashing openly, the working relationship began to crack in ways everyone on set could feel. Cracks before Episode 1. Long before All in the Family premiered and became a national talking point, tension was already present behind the scenes. The conflict between Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner did not slowly develop over the years of filming. It began early, quietly, and firmly, before the audience ever heard the theme song. What later looked like a long-running feud actually took shape in the show's earliest days, when expectations were being set and first impressions were forming. Table reads were one of the first places where problems surfaced. These sessions were meant to be straightforward. The cast would sit together, read the script aloud, and get a feel for the rhythm of the episode. For O'Connor, this was a time to listen, adjust subtly, and wait for direction from the writers or director. He saw table reads as preparation, not debate. Reiner, however, approached them differently. He often spoke up, questioned lines, and pushed for changes in tone or meaning. He wanted to clarify intent and sharpen the political message right away. These interruptions did not sit well with O'Connor. From his perspective, Reiner was stepping outside his role as an actor. O'Connor believed strongly in professional boundaries, and to him, questioning scenes in front of the group felt disruptive. It wasn't about disagreement over ideas, it was about how and when those disagreements were expressed. O'Connor saw this behavior as a lack of discipline and, more importantly, a lack of respect for the structure of the set. Rehearsals only made things worse. As scenes were blocked and run through multiple times, Reiner continued to challenge moments he felt were unclear or too soft. He questioned delivery, pacing, and intent, especially when it came to Archie Bunker. O'Connor interpreted this as interference. He felt that Reiner was trying to influence how Archie should be portrayed, even though that was not Reiner's responsibility. To O'Connor, this crossed a line. What made the situation harder was that these moments were happening in front of others. Crew members, fellow actors, and sometimes even producers witnessed the tension. O'Connor was not someone who responded well to public challenges. He believed disagreements should be handled privately or through proper channels. Reiner's open approach felt confrontational to him. even if that wasn't Reiner's intention. As these interactions repeated, first impressions began to harden. O'Connor started to see Reiner not as a passionate young actor, but as someone who didn't understand limits. Reiner, on the other hand, likely saw O'Connor as rigid and unwilling to adapt. Neither man made much effort to bridge that gap. Instead, they concluded with each other early on and held on to them. Once those judgments were formed, they rarely softened. Every new disagreement reinforced existing beliefs. What might have been minor creative tension turned into a lasting divide. By the time cameras officially rolled on the first episode, the relationship was already strained. And once filming began, those early cracks only grew deeper with every scene they shared. Archie tensions explode. At the center of the conflict between Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner was one question that never had an easy answer. Was Archie Bunker meant to be simply wrong, or was he meant to be human? That disagreement shaped nearly every argument they had and turned Archie into more than just a character. He became the symbol of what each man believed television should do. Rob Reiner believed Archie needed to be clearly exposed and defeated in every episode. To him, Archie's bigotry was dangerous, and the show had a responsibility to leave no doubt about where it stood. Reiner pushed for moral clarity. He wanted scenes to end with Archie corrected, embarrassed, or proven wrong in a way the audience could not miss. Anything less felt risky. In his view, allowing Archie to appear sympathetic or complex might confuse viewers or soften the message the show was trying to deliver. Carroll O'Connor saw the character very differently. He believed Archie's power came from realism. Archie wasn't meant to be a lesson wrapped in jokes. He was meant to feel like a real person that viewers might recognize in their own lives. O'Connor felt that showing Archie as fully human, flaws and all, forced people to confront uncomfortable truths. If Archie was reduced to a one-note villain, O'Connor believed the character would lose his impact. This difference led to constant tension during rehearsals. Reiner often argued that certain moments made Archie seem too reasonable or too likable. O'Connor pushed back, insisting that real people are complicated and inconsistent. He believed ambiguity was not weakness, it was honesty. In his mind, the audience didn't need to be told what to think. They needed to be shown behavior and allowed to react on their own. One of O'Connor's biggest fears was that Archie would turn into a cartoon villain. He worried that exaggeration would replace truth and that the character would stop reflecting reality. Once that happened, O'Connor felt the show would lose what made it special. He believed comedy worked best when it stayed grounded, even when the ideas being explored were uncomfortable. As these debates continued, O'Connor began to feel that Reiner was trying to control the character. He saw Reiner's constant challenges as a form of policing Archie, shaping him to fit a specific message rather than letting the character exist naturally. To O'Connor, that crossed a line. He felt his work was being judged not on performance, but on ideology. This battle never truly ended, and every episode added more strain between them. And the deeper the fight over Archie went, the harder it became for either man to back down. Rehearsals as silent warfare. The conflict between Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner did not usually explode into loud arguments. Instead, it simmered. It stayed just below the surface, showing up in small moments that everyone in the room could feel. This made the tension harder to address because nothing dramatic happened that demanded immediate intervention. Yet the atmosphere was heavy, and it followed the cast and crew through every rehearsal. O'Connor often used silence as a form of authority. When he felt challenged or disrespected, he did not argue loudly or make a scene. He would lean back in his chair, fold his arms, and stop engaging. Sometimes he would break eye contact and stare off into the distance. Other times, he would simply stop speaking altogether. These were not random habits. They were deliberate signals. He was showing that he was unhappy and that the process had crossed a line. His nonverbal resistance went further. In some rehearsals, O'Connor would pause mid-scene and refuse to continue until the tension was addressed or the direction changed. He didn't shout. He didn't explain himself in long speeches. He let the silence do the work. Everyone in the room felt it. Directors, producers, crew members, and other actors could sense the shift immediately. This created psychological pressure on everyone involved. When the lead actor stops and disengages, the room freezes. No one wants to be the person who escalates the situation. No one wants to take sides. People start walking on eggshells. Rehearsals become less about creativity and more about avoiding conflict. Even simple discussions about a scene can feel risky. The tension was never fully acknowledged in public. On the surface, the set looked professional and controlled. But privately, people knew something was off. Conversations were more careful. Decisions took longer. Some people avoided stepping into discussions that might trigger another silent standoff. It was a tense environment that everyone recognized but rarely named directly. This kind of conflict is often harder to resolve than open arguments. There are no clear outbursts to point to, no dramatic incidents to settle. Instead, there is a constant undercurrent of discomfort that slowly wears people down. And as the pressure built, the line between professional tension and personal resentment kept getting thinner when conflict turned personal. At a certain point on All in the Family, the conflict between Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner stopped being about scenes, lines, or character choices. What began as creative disagreement slowly shifted into something more personal and much harder to fix. The moment that change happened, the working relationship between the two men was already beyond repair. O'Connor no longer separated Rob Reiner from the character he played. Michael Stivic was written as Archie Bunker's ideological opposite, and over time, O'Connor began to feel that Reiner wasn't just performing that role. He believed Reiner carried the same attitude off-camera. Arguments that started about dialogue or tone felt less like professional discussions and more like personal criticism. To O'Connor, it no longer felt as if Reiner was acting with him. It felt like Reiner was pushing against him. This led to a growing feeling of being judged, rather than collaborated with. O'Connor took his work seriously and expected the same level of respect from those around him. When Reiner questioned scenes or challenged how Archie was portrayed, O'Connor felt those challenges came with moral judgment attached. Instead of hearing, "Let's try this another way," he heard, "This way is wrong." That difference mattered to him. It made the environment tense and uncomfortable. Over time, O'Connor became convinced that Reiner believed he was intellectually superior. He felt Reiner approached every discussion as if he already knew the correct answer and expected others to fall in line. Whether this was Reiner's intention or not, that perception stuck. O'Connor viewed it as arrogance and, worse, as disrespect toward the craft of acting. He believed performance should be shaped by experience, preparation, and emotional truth, not by ideology or debate. Once that belief settled in, respect began to erode quickly. O'Connor was not someone who easily forgot perceived slights. Each interruption, each challenge, and each disagreement added to a growing list in his mind. What might have been resolved through conversation instead hardened into resentment. He stopped giving Reiner the benefit of the doubt. Every action was now interpreted through a lens of mistrust. Creative disagreement had officially turned into personal resentment. The set became a place where communication shut down instead of opening up. O'Connor withdrew, using silence and distance rather than argument. Reiner continued to push for clarity and confrontation. Neither adjusted their approach, and the gap between them widened with every episode. At that stage, the conflict was no longer about All in the Family or even Archie Bunker. It was about pride, boundaries, and respect. And once those lines were crossed, there was no easy way back. And as the tension deepened, it began to affect not just the two men, but everyone working around them. Cultural clash on set. As All in the Family grew into a massive hit, the attention surrounding it began to shift the balance of power on and off the screen. Critics and commentators often framed Michael Stivic as the voice of reason. He was praised as the character who stood up to Archie Bunker and challenged his outdated views. Reviews regularly highlighted Michael as the moral center of the show, the person audiences were meant to agree with and support. At the same time, Archie was increasingly treated as a cultural obstacle. Many critics focused less on the complexity of the character and more on what he represented. Archie became shorthand for everything society needed to move past. While this response aligned with the show's political impact, it didn't reflect how Carroll O'Connor saw his work. He believed Archie was meant to reveal problems, not simply be dismissed as one. O'Connor paid close attention to reviews and public reactions. He absorbed them deeply. As praise for Michael grew, he began to feel that Archie's humanity was being ignored. To him, the conversation around the show was becoming too simple. The audience wasn't being asked to think anymore. They were being told who was right and who was wrong. This shift left O'Connor feeling stripped of control over his own character. Archie no longer felt like a performance shaped by nuance and realism. Instead, he felt pulled into a larger cultural narrative that O'Connor didn't fully recognize or agree with. The success of the show brought influence, but it also narrowed how Archie was understood. In the end, what many saw as a cultural victory felt to O'Connor like an artistic loss. And as the pressure of success grew, the tension behind the scenes only became harder to contain. The production meltdown. Norman Lear, the creator of All in the Family, was no stranger to strong personalities and heated debates. In the early stages of the show, he tolerated a certain amount of friction between Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner. Lear believed that creative tension could be useful. He thought that the arguments and differing perspectives might sharpen performances and make the show feel more authentic. For a while, this approach worked. The energy of their disagreements translated into scenes that were tense, dynamic, and compelling. However, as filming continued, the tension began to affect production in ways that could not be ignored. Rehearsals slowed, and scenes required more takes than planned because O'Connor and Reiner often clashed over delivery, tone, and interpretation. What had been manageable creative energy started turning into a daily obstacle. Other cast members and crew began to notice the strain. The friction was no longer just about the characters, it was interfering with the work of everyone on set. The situation reached a critical moment during a now famous silent standoff. During one rehearsal, after another disagreement over how a scene should play out, O'Connor stopped performing, leaned back in his chair, and refused to speak or move. The room went completely quiet. Cameras kept rolling, but no one acted. The crew froze, unsure what to do. Lear realized that intervention was necessary. He stepped in to reassert authority and regain control over the set, reminding both actors of the boundaries of their roles and the need to keep production moving. Even after this intervention, Lear recognized that the underlying conflict would never fully resolve. The disagreement between O'Connor and Reiner was rooted in their philosophies, personalities, and sense of creative ownership. It was deeper than a single argument or rehearsal. After the show ended, when All in the Family wrapped in 1979, the intense daily friction between Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner finally disappeared from O'Connor's immediate work life. With Reiner no longer on set, O'Connor experienced an emotional shift. The tension that had shadowed rehearsals and filming lifted noticeably. Reports from colleagues and cast members at the time noted that O'Connor seemed lighter, calmer, and more at ease in the absence of Reiner. The constant feeling of being challenged or judged had vanished, allowing him to focus more fully on his craft and on his own approach to the character of Archie Bunker. O'Connor immediately moved into his next project, Archie Bunker's Place, where he continued to play the iconic role but without the direct friction that had defined his previous work environment. On this new show, the atmosphere was calmer and more controlled. While the cast still worked hard to maintain the quality of the series, there was none of the undercurrent of tension that had been so present on All in the Family. O'Connor could fully inhabit the character without navigating constant ideological disputes with Reiner. Meanwhile, Reiner's career was taking him in an entirely different direction. He moved behind the camera, establishing himself as a respected director with films like This Is Spinal Tap and Stand By Me. The two men's professional paths never crossed again. There were no reunions, no collaborations, and no public attempts to reconcile their differences. Throughout this time, Reiner largely refused to engage publicly about their past disagreements. He did not challenge O'Connor's version of events, nor did he attempt to offer his own detailed account. Where O'Connor had been outspoken about the conflict, Reiner's silence replaced confrontation. By choosing not to comment, he allowed the record of their feud to remain as O'Connor had described it, unresolved and final. In the end of the show brought relief for O'Connor and opportunity for both men to pursue their careers, but it did not bring closure. The silence between them became permanent, marking the conclusion of a conflict that had begun long before cameras started rolling. And even as years went by, that silence held, leaving the story of their feud frozen in time. A feud without closure. Carroll O'Connor never softened his stance on Rob Reiner, even as the years went on. In interviews late in life, he gave a clear, blunt judgment. "I've worked with many people I couldn't stand, but Rob topped them all." Those words were final and uncompromising. They weren't delivered in anger or as part of a story. They were a statement of fact, a reflection of decades of unresolved tension. For O'Connor, the conflict with Reiner wasn't a matter of differing acting styles or creative disagreements. It was a personal matter that left a lasting mark. There was no reconciliation during their lifetimes. The two men never repaired their relationship, never met privately to talk through their differences, and never reached an understanding. Even after the end of All in the Family and the move into new projects, the distance between them grew. Their careers diverged so dramatically that professional interaction became impossible, and personal reconciliation was never pursued. The feud simply remained unaddressed and unresolved. When O'Connor passed away in June 2001, there was still no public sign of reconciliation. Rob Reiner's response was measured and restrained. He acknowledged O'Connor's importance to television history and his contribution to the craft of acting, but he never used the opportunity to soften the narrative or offer his own version of events. Reiner's silence in the face of O'Connor's passing was consistent with the way he had handled the feud during their lifetimes, choosing not to inflame the situation, not to rewrite history, and not to reopen old wounds. Even personal tragedy, which had softened other aspects of O'Connor's public life, left his feelings toward Reiner unchanged. The loss of his son, Hugh, in 1995 deeply affected him, bringing more compassion and reflection to his public persona. But it did not change his judgment of Reiner. Where O'Connor had shown growth in other areas, the resentment toward Reiner remained fixed, deliberate, and permanent. The result is a conflict frozen in time. It did not end dramatically, and it did not resolve quietly. There was no final handshake, no public reconciliation, and no private conversation that corrected decades of misunderstanding. Instead, the story of O'Connor and Reiner's feud is marked by finality, silence, and permanence. It serves as a rare example of a long-standing conflict in Hollywood that remained untouched and unresolved until the end of life. And even now, long after the cameras stopped rolling, the feud still leaves questions we'll never fully answer. The story of Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner reminds us that not every conflict has a clean ending. Their on-screen battles were just the tip of the iceberg, while behind the scenes, a personal feud quietly shaped years of work, success, and tension. Even decades later, the silence between them speaks louder than any interview or public statement ever could. If you found this story fascinating, make sure to hit like, share it, and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes Hollywood stories you won't hear anywhere else.